everyone, it's Paige. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I thought that I would talk about some horror, thriller, mystery novels that are on my TBR that I would like to consider reading this fall season. Some of these books I've had on my TBR for a while, and others are kind of new to me. I want to keep today's video fairly short, so I'm going to keep it to 5 books that are on my TBR, although you can rest assured that my spooky TBR is quite a bit longer. Before I get started, if you would like to leave your spooky reads down below, what you'll be reading for the month of October, or even just all of fall, I would love to hear your choices, why you chose them, and I would even love to get some recommendations from you as far as spooky books go. During the entire month of October, I will have spooky, Halloween, fall-themed videos. So next week, I'm very excited about the video that I am planning to record having to do with Goosebumps. So if you liked Goosebumps as a child, I think you'll like that video too. Without further ado, let's get into our list. So my first book is Brother by Anaya Alborn. This came as a recommendation from my friend and co-worker Jess. I recently finished the novel Penpal, which was a recommendation from her, and it had also already been on my TBR, and I really enjoyed it, but I was craving something sort of similar, so I asked Jess, what is another book that gives you the same sort of feeling? And she gave me a list, and I picked Brother off of that list. This is a horror mystery thriller novel that takes place in modern day West Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains. Our protagonist is 19-year-old Michael, who is a part of the Morrow family. They live in a rundown farmhouse that seems to be at the middle of a lot of missing persons cases, and yet the police never knock on their door. But Michael does not want to be a part of his family's tradition. He's looking for a way out, and when he meets a young girl who he becomes smitten with, things kind of take a turn for the worse when his family finds out. From what I understand, this book is dark. I would take a very close and contemplative look at the trigger warnings for this novel because I don't think it's for the faint of heart. I am super excited though because this is my first Alborn novel, and I think if I like this novel, then I'll try her other ones as well. The next book on my TBR is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This was a recommendation from my dear friend Kaylin. She told me that this book traumatized her, and if you know me, I am always looking for some good horror trauma. I think it's fair to say that my favorite movie genre is horror, and obviously I like to read it as well, so at this point I've become a little desensitized to a lot of horror. I'm hoping, because Kaylin was scared of this, that it will also scare me. This is a paranormal mystery thriller horror novel. It follows Maggie Holt, who as a child moved into a rambling Victorian estate called Bainbury Hall. Not very long into owning this mansion, Maggie's parents, along with her, fled into the night after experiencing very traumatic paranormal events that her father later recounted in a nonfiction novel that he published, which created a sort of fame that followed the family for many years. Maggie, however, grows up to be a restoration expert, at least in houses, and she doesn't really remember the event that is described in her father's novel. She doesn't believe in ghosts. So after her father passes away, Bainbury Hall is passed along to her. She decides she's going to go out and renovate it so that she can sell it. But when she arrives, she starts to encounter some of the things that her father described in his book. So I'm getting the sense of like a modern gothic horror. I love gothic paranormal horror. I love classic ghost stories set in sprawling Victorian mansions. Last year I really liked The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. This feels like the perfect Halloween read, so I'm really excited for it. I think I'll read it after I finish Brother. Next up we have another novel that involves gothic horror and Victorian houses, and that is The Elementals by Michael McDowell. This book was not recommended to me, or at least not that I remember. Might have seen it in a TikTok video, but I can't remember. It's been on my TBR for a while though. As I said, this is a Southern Gothic paranormal thriller. I believe it's a contemporary novel, but it does follow 2 prestigious sort of families who traditionally vacation on this bit of land by the Gulf that houses 3 large Victorian mansions. 2 of those Victorian mansions are well kept, and the family stay within them, and the 3rd mansion sits abandoned and filling with sand. Now, that 3rd house seems to be hosting some sort of dark presence that is lying in wait for the day that it can make itself known. Not a very thorough description on this novel, so it's a bit of a mystery to me, but it has good reviews, and there's something about the cover specifically that draws me in. I know, don't, you know, judge a book by its cover, but for some reason the artwork on the cover just gives me a good feeling, or like a bad feeling, but in a good way. So if I end up liking Home Before Dark and I still want to stay in that gothic horror, I might transition to the Elementals. Okay, we have two more. The next one I'm going to show you is definitely not a gothic horror, but definitely still a horror. And then the last one is going to be more of a light-hearted read, but still spooky for the Halloween season. So once again, taking a bit of a turn from the other paranormal classic horror stories, I have wanted to read The Fireman by Joe Hill for years. Can't remember if I got this before or after reading Nosferatu, but I talk about Nosferatu, I feel like, constantly. I love that book. There is a TV adaptation if you're interested. I tried to watch it, but I just couldn't really get into it. But ever since reading that, I've wanted to read something else by Joe Hill. I feel like I have a lot of trust in him, a lot of faith in him at least. And this novel won the 2016 Goodreads Horror Choice Award. So it comes kind of highly recommended, at least from the book community on Goodreads. This is a post-apocalyptic horror fantasy. It is set in a world that has been overrun with this disease that they call dragon scale, which essentially causes sudden combustion in its victims. So, you know, spots appear on their skin, and then within a certain amount of time, they suddenly go up in flames. This follows Harper, who is an expecting mother. She discovers that she is infected, and her husband, believing that she is infecting him, abandons her. Harper's goal is at least to live until she can give birth, because she does believe that she can give birth to a healthy baby. So that's her goal. But after being abandoned by her husband, she realizes that she's not as alone as she thinks she is. She meets a very compelling stranger that they call the Fireman, who is kind of considered a madman, and yet he, despite being afflicted with this disease, has managed to control the fire, and he is living through the infection somehow. So Harper has to decide if she would like to stay with the Fireman and whether or not she can put her faith in his methods. Like I said, I've been wanting to read something else from Joe Hill for years. This is, however, a pretty hefty book, so while I may not get to this in October, I can at least try maybe to get to this through at the fall season. Alright, the last book I want to talk about today, as I said, is a bit more lighthearted than the others. This is The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. This is a coming-of-age mystery horror novel. I can't speak to how horrific those horror elements are because I've not read this, but I'm assuming this is more palatable because it does have a young cast of, you know, preteens and teenagers. This takes place in the 80s and so resembles things like Stranger Things. If you're interested in that, you might like this as well. And follows Jake Baker. The summer that Jake turns 12, he befriends a pair of twins that move into town, and his uncle Calvin decides to initiate all of the kids into the Saturday Night Ghost Club. However, as the summer goes on, this lighthearted project and Ghost Club seems to turn more sinister. I think this is a good book to transition from summer into fall with, because like I said, this is set during the summer, but has those horror, paranormal tones. So I don't know, maybe if I can get to it this month, I'll try to get to it before the weather turns too cold, which it's kind of on and off most days. Some days it's really warm and it feels like summer again, and other days I feel like I can't feel my fingers. This might also be kind of like a palate cleanser from reading all of the true dark horror that I have in mind, so maybe after I read Brother and one of those gothic horrors that I just mentioned, this will feel like a nice breath of fresh air, but still feel spooky, you know what I mean? Again, I have pretty high hopes for this. Craig Davidson has wonderful reviews, and I am a fan of Stranger Things, so I think it would be fun to return to the 80s era. Anyway, those were all 5 of the books that I wanted to talk about today. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you have a TBR of horror, thriller, mystery, just fall inspired books that you would like to share below, please do that. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and you can join our Discord channel called Paging Through Club, where we vote on a book to read monthly and we talk about books, games, everything in between. We were talking about doing something vampire related this month, and I know I have a lot of vampire lovers out there, so if you would like that sort of thing, come and join us. Hope you're all having a wonderful week, and I will see you back here very, very soon. Bye!